and welcome to Nature's Narrative. I'm your host, Michaela, and today we'll be diving into impacts of fire on the environment and uncover the importance of burns and harm caused by wildfires. And all of today's sources will be listed in the episode notes. So, why does it matter? From catastrophic wildfires that dominate the headlines to carefully planned, prescribed burns, fire has a duel with nature. It can both bring major destruction and offer life and renewal. Today we will break down these impacts and help you understand why fire plays a huge and important role. But before we dive into the topics of impacts of fires on the environment, we need to talk about some definitions. There are distinguishing factors between wildfires and prescribed burns, or some know them as controlled burns. Wildfires are uncontrolled fires that burn in wildland vegetation, often in rural areas. And prescribed burns are planned fires used to meet management objectives. Now, these objectives can look different for each burn that happens, and we will get into that a little bit later. The reason why I chose this topic is because it's very personal for me. I grew up with controlled burns or prescribed burns due to the fact that I lived in the South. So this was the norm for me. I was chatting with a woman at my previous job, and she was from upstate New York, and she had never seen a controlled burn before. She thought it was very bad, and we went into the topics and reasoning on why prescribed burns are actually very good for our environment. So first we need to talk about the ecosystem impacts of wildfires. So this is a case study of the Okefenokee Swamp wildfire of 2017. So in 2017, the West Mims fire burned over 150,000 acres in the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. This wildfire destroyed critical habitats for species like the red-cocked woodpecker and the gopher tortoise. Both of these species are already considered a threatened species. The tortoise is the threatened species, or an endangered, which is the woodpecker. Both of these species rely on fire-adapted ecosystems but are vulnerable to the intense heat and scope of uncontrolled wildfires. So we're going to go into the impact it had on the Everglades. Wildfires in the Florida Everglades disrupt the delicate ecosystem by destroying native trees like the cypress and mangrove. These trees provide an essential habitat for species like the Florida panther and wading birds. Without their protective cover, the entire ecosystem becomes more vulnerable to invasive species, soil erosion, and changes in water flow. Our next case is the 2018 Everglades wildfire, which was a devastating wildfire that happened in 2018, and it burned over 36,000 acres in the Everglades, reducing stands of the cypress trees that had stood there for over decades. This not only displaced countless of species, but it also affected water filtration and storage, both critical functions of the Everglades system. There was also soil and water degradation in a California campfire in 2018, and because of this, severe wildfires led to erosion and runoff. Soil instability makes it so hard for plants to recover, and nearby water sources become polluted with ash. But now we're going to move on to the community impacts that wildfires have. This is a case study in Gatlinburg, Tennessee in 2016, and we're going to be talking about the destruction of property and lives. When the wildfires happened in Gatlinburg in 2016, it caused over $2 billion in damages, destroyed 2,500 structures, and claimed 14 lives. Most of these fires were preventable with better forest management. Another one we're going to be looking at is the Rocky Mountain National Park fires of 2012. So in 2012, the Fern Lake fire burned over 3,500 acres in the Rockies. While no lives were lost, the fire forced the evacuation of hundreds of residents and businesses in Estes Park, causing a huge disruption in tourism, which is a huge and critical part of their local economy. The economic losses from reduced visitation stretched into the following year as the recovery efforts continued. I visited the Rockies back in summer of 2024, and it's a very beautiful place, but even then, visiting in 2024, I was still able to see the impacts of the Fern Lake fire. It was devastating. And the fire that happened in 2012, this is a quote, "The fire ignited by an illegal campfire underscored the dangers of human negligence and the ripple effects wildfires can have on nearby communities." So wildfire smoke affects millions of people during the 2021 Western fires. Air quality in nearby states reached hazardous levels, impacting those with asthma and other respiratory conditions. In the Rocky Mountain area, communities downwind of the 2012 wildfire experienced temporary spikes in air pollution and prompting health advisories. So, lastly, we're going to be looking at environmental impacts of wildfires. The first one is going to be about carbon emissions, and this is a case study in Australia about black summer fires from 2019 to 2020. These fires released 715 million tons of CO2. This number is equivalent to what an entire country emits in a year, just 1 year. This obviously accelerates global warming and creates a positive feedback loop for future wildfires, but in this context, positive does not mean good. The reason why this positive feedback loop is not good is because wildfires emit CO2, and when vegetation burns, it releases a tremendous amount of stored CO2 into the air, which then contributes to global warming. With global warming, it increases fire risks. Warmer temperatures led to droughts and drier conditions, making this a perfect atmosphere for wildfires. More wildfires emit more carbon, and this in turn amplifies global warming, making the cycle start all over again. So now we're going to be talking more along the lines of prescribed fires. I'm going to give you some history. So obviously we need to have a better understanding of what prescribed burns is, but the only way we can do that is with history. So prescribed burning has been practiced for thousands of years by indigenous people worldwide, including Native American tribes. They were the first to use fire intentionally to manage landscapes. The Kuruk and Yurok tribes of California used fire to maintain oak forests. This ensured a steady supply of acorns and game. Similarly, the Creek and Cherokee tribes of the Southeast regularly burned longleaf pine forest to promote new growth and maintain biodiversity. The longleaf pine is now an endangered species of pine, but we'll talk about that another day. Fire wasn't just a tool to them, but it was a symbol of renewal and balance in many Native American traditions. But this deep knowledge and appreciation was largely ignored after colonization. By the early 20th century, the U.S. government implemented policy of strict fire suppressions, and in 1944, the introduction of Smokey bears cemented that all fire is bad and destructive. Because of this is why our wildfires are so bad. So now, since we know some history about the prescribed burns, we can now look at the ecosystem benefits. So this is a case study about Georgia's longleaf pine restoration. The Longleaf Pine Alliance and Georgia DNR have used prescribed burns to restore over 1.3 million acres of longleaf pine forests. These burns are critical for species like the eastern indigo snake and the bobwhite quail. The Longleaf Alliance has a mascot called Burner Bob that promotes the education on prescribed burns to the community. And to learn more about Burner Bob, you'll want to check out their website. This next case study comes from Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge in Georgia, protecting the swamp ecosystem. The Okefenokee Swamp is a fire-adapted ecosystem, like I said earlier, but fire suppression led to increased fuel loads and large wildfires like the Honey Prairie Fire of 2011. Prescribed burns that happen today are now used in and around the swamp to promote and maintain natural fire cycles, reduce underbrush, and prevent catastrophic fires. These types of burns protect the swamp's unique habitats, including those for sandhill cranes and black bears, while reducing the risk of nearby communities. These regular burns have been credited with preventing another major wildfire in the region since 2011. In the wildfire part of this episode, but now we're going to bring the Rockies up again. So, fire-dependent ecosystems in the Rockies include the ponderosa pine and aspen woodlands. They rely on prescribed burns to rejuvenate and maintain biodiversity. Prescribed burns mimic natural fire cycles, ensuring these habitats remain healthy and productive. Fire stimulates aspen regeneration, creating food and shelter for species like elk and beavers. The burned areas open the forest canopy, allowing light to reach the ground and promote the growth of grasses, wildflowers, and shrubs critical for pollinators. So now we're going to be talking about the upper beaver meadows. So, prescribed fires in this area aim to reduce invasive plants and promote native grass growth. These burns also create natural fire breaks to protect nearby community. And the impact of this is monitoring shows improved soil quality and significant increases in native plant cover after burns. And the success of these prescribed burns is you can see a fuel reduction. A post-fire analysis showed that these areas with prior prescribed burns were less severely impacted by the East Troublesome Fire of 2020, one of Colorado's largest wildfires. And it also promotes biodiversity. Prescribed burns have increased the abundance of fire-adapted plant species and improved habitat conditions for elk, black bears, and migratory birds. And now we're going to look at the environmental impacts. This is for carbon management. Unlike wildfires, prescribed fires release far less CO2 because they burn under controlled conditions, minimizing fuel loads and preventing hotter and more destructive fires later. So this quote is from the Nature Conservancy in Georgia. The Nature Conservancy partnered with landowners in Georgia to conduct burns on private lands, improving soil quality and reducing overall wildfire risk. So now we're going to be comparing the two. So the key differences in the impact is wildfires are unpredictable and extremely devastating with long-term impacts on ecosystems and community. An example of that would be the Okefenokee wildfires highlight the cost of unmanaged wildlands. Prescribed burns are controlled and very beneficial for ecosystems, reducing fuel loads and maintaining biodiversity. An example of that would be the restoration of longleaf pine ecosystems in Georgia is a testament to the power of prescribed burns. And the shared lesson would be wildfires show us the destructive side of fire. Prescribed burns highlight how fire, when managed properly, can benefit both people and nature. So, to summarize our key points for today, wildfires and prescribed burns are not the same. Wildfires often bring destruction, while prescribed burns are an essential tool for ecological health and wildfire prevention. If you live in the Southeast, you can support organizations like Georgia DNR, Longleaf Alliance, and the Nature Conservancy. And you can also learn about prescribed burns and advocate for better fire management in your area. And that wraps up for today's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can always email me or leave a comment down below. Next time, we'll be diving into why black bears matter, so you don't want to miss that. I just want to thank you all for joining me on this journey and wanting to learn what I love and love learning about. And let's be honest, you can always learn something new about a topic that you already know about, and together we can make that difference. I'll see you guys next week. Bye!